Good evening and welcome to E Squared Empowerment with Elysia. I'm your host, and I am so excited to connect you with Melissa Chanselle-Hary. She is a sex coach and death doula, which is a very interesting combination. She's located in Nevada, and she is currently getting her certification in being an erotic blueprint coach, which is just a really cool thing. If you haven't seen Sex, Love, and Goop with Gwyneth Paltrow, you should, and then you will get to know a little bit more about what that is. Or you can stay tuned with us now and learn a little bit more at the end. She's here today to talk to us about the healing power of consent, which is very important, persona work, and getting to experience your full spectrum self, and navigating tender conversations about sex with ease. So this will undoubtedly be a very fun and healing conversation. Melissa, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and deeply appreciate the opportunity.
You're very welcome. So, Melissa, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what started you on this journey of wanting to become a sex coach.
Yeah, I did not come by it naturally.
No, it wasn't like, this is what I should do for the rest of my life.
No, I mean, I've been interested in sex my whole life, was super curious about it. My journey starts from the beginning. So I was born and raised in Winchester, Virginia. My dad was an immigrant from Cambodia just after the Vietnam War, and my mom is born and raised in Virginia. So I am a biracial woman from the South. And so that identity at that time came with a lot of expectations and a very clear structure of like what I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to present in the world. Also, I was raised Catholic, so I also had a sense of faith guiding that, leading that structure.
Sure.
So, I did the thing I was supposed to do. I did all the things I was told to do. I went to college, I got married, I had a kid, I bought a house, I started my retirement, I was saving, and I did all the things that should have made me feel like I'm on top of it, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and just was genuinely dissatisfied. I came to this feeling and this awareness in my mid 30s. So it felt a little early for a midlife crisis. And it just happened to intersect with the pandemic starting. And so I had an opportunity to just sit in reflection. And what I realized was that I am interested in and skilled at different things. And I really wanted to address some of the challenges that I had experienced. And I'd started to do some of the work. I experienced a pretty tumultuous childhood and a fair amount of sexual trauma that my family didn't know about. And so there was a lot that I just kept pretty buried deeply and had this interesting tension between having become a sexually active body at a pretty young age, not understanding what was going on, while also then growing into a human who really enjoyed sex. And there was this really difficult tension that I really didn't know how to navigate. But so, in my mid 30s, as things were settling down and I was just like, this is not it. I want more than this. I actually started to do the work for myself to figure out, well, who am I? What am I? What do I want? And I didn't know where I was headed. And right now what I have found is that I'm in the liminal spaces of sex, death, and Reiki, and it's feeling just fine.
I love it when people are able to come to a place within themselves to start the healing process and give ourselves permission to see who that authentic self is, even if it doesn't necessarily align with social norms.
Yeah.
Right?
I want that for everyone. And I think when I realized for myself that listening to my inner knowing was more important than anyone else's expectation, which is so much easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure. That's a process all on its own.
But letting that happen and letting myself actually just figure out what was true for me. I'm just grateful that I had the time and the space to be able to do that.
Yeah, that is definitely a gift. And a supportive partner, right? Mm-hmm. Was there support there?
There absolutely was. And I think, I've been with my partner for 18 years, married. We've been together for 20 years. And he has seen the full journey because I was showing up in a lot of ways like not my best self and coming with a lot of patterns and expectations that I just brought with me. I didn't necessarily consent to them. I didn't actually pick them. And I had a lot of love and a lot of support. And even now, I mean, going and publicly talking about my sex life or other people's sex lives, he exists in a different container where maybe he wouldn't choose to do that, but he's so supportive and so loving. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is my relationship with my husband.
It's awesome. And a monogamous relationship, because we talked about poly and ethical
Yes.
non-monogamous too, and being able to keep that alive
Yes.
in a monogamous relationship. That's something we'll talk about more in our group coaching call if anybody wants to join us there and July 17th. But yeah, tell us more about the communication that was required to go on that journey.
Yeah. So, when I decided that, when I realized truths about myself, I mean, I had to do the work for myself first. So you can do some of this work in hopes of taking care of your relationship. We were in a space where we'd been married for 13 years. I had experienced a pretty difficult, I experienced a difficult first pregnancy, had a miscarriage, got pregnant again pretty quickly, had a baby, and had really, really like devastating. There's a word for it now. It's PMAD, which is perinatal maternal anxiety disorder. So it has a phrase now, but 11 years ago when I had a baby, that was not a common term that was being used, at least in the region and the community that I was in. But I was really ill. I was really sick. I really struggled to sort of return to myself or even begin to understand what this new role of mom and wife meant. And so we actually found ourselves in a really tension-filled and stressful place as new parents. And we were not doing well. We weren't communicating well. And I really wasn't sure if we were going to make it. And so I started to do my own work, but it was always with the intention of like, how do we help ourselves and what do we need? And so in finding the blueprints and in going through my own journey, I was able to communicate effectively, clearly, and also not take on things that were not mine to own, and to be very clear about what I was open to doing and what I was not open to doing, but communicating that with compassion and patience. And I really did not think we would make it this far. And so the fact that we are celebrating 18 years in August is, again, something I'm super proud of, but also just like, I just believe that when you take the time to do the inventory and understand consent and understand the full range of yourself, and then bring your best self to your partner, like there is no such thing as incompatibility, right? There is only rigidity. And so, so just having that is something that I'm really grateful for, but it's what has allowed us to stay together. And we are a chosen monogamous couple. It is an intention that we set. And so it's pretty exciting 20 years in to not be bored or disappointed that this is the thing that I'm in.
That's awesome. You hear that, folks? It is possible to stay in a monogamous relationship for a super long time. I'm a big advocate for everyone to do whatever you want to do in relationships that are in alignment with your values and that are communicated to your partner.
Yes.
Transparency, trust, respect are key in any healthy relationship.
Yeah, and there's so much that's, I'm so sorry. There's so much that's
go ahead.
possible, right? Like, so polyamory is great for the people for whom that's possible and the range and the options that are there. And monogamy is great for the people for whom that works. And so there's so many beautiful, beautiful opportunities. And I think one of the things we have discovered within our monogamy is that I love lots of things and lots of people, and I'm fed by lots of different things. And so just defining for us, how I feel loved, how he feels loved, what makes us feel like we're together in a given situation or like in life together. It's completely transformed how we relate to each other and people outside of us. And, it really is beautiful. And so I'm with you 100% on like, there are so many different ways to do it. And it's just about figuring out what you need and knowing yourself, and then being clear with your partner about that, and then finding a way to get there together.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, what's your why? Like, why do we do the things that we do? And how can we advocate for the support and boundaries that we need within that journey?
Yes.
Which brings us to the conversation of consent and healing power of consent.
Yeah, I think consent is something we are not talking about enough. I think it's more prevalent as the Me Too movement came onto the scene, as we were talking about the different things that were happening to different groups of people. It's the word consent is more within the vernacular than it was when I grew up. But when I was a kid, I couldn't have told you what it was. And I was expected to be quiet. I was expected to be grateful. I was expected to be agreeable and nice. And in doing those things, there were people who exploited that training, that conditioning. And I found myself in situations that caused a lot of harm. There was a lot of sexual trauma that one, didn't have words for, and I certainly didn't understand that there wasn't consent. And so as part of the erotic blueprints, this is a super important part of the work. And so when I started to go through some of this work for myself, and it was actually before the pandemic that I started this work, maybe 2017, I mean, my mind was blown at what consent was and how to establish it, right? And so the idea that then I could sort of look back in reflection and start to name, that actually wasn't consent, and not from a place of becoming rewounded again, but from a place of empowerment, of saying, I actually didn't consent to that, which means all data is good data. I'll take that input. And in the future, here's what I want for myself. And here's how I'm going to be specific and be clear about what I want. And so consent is something that, as a people pleaser, as a recovering people pleaser, consent was something that also helped me establish boundaries. Because sometimes that word boundary becomes so scary, or some people are like, oh, it's hard. It means I'm going to be in arguments with people, or it means I'm going to automatically be in conflict with others. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think when I found consent and the concept of, and the framework of it coming with a side of fries, so to speak, it just gave me a different path, or a doorway into that conversation and into representing it for myself. So we say it comes with a side of fries, which means that it's freely given, it's revocable, it's informed, it's enthusiastic, and it's specific. So when I learned that, just the idea that, it has a framework, and here's very clearly, I can tell myself what it looks like, and will help me identify when it's not present. And so, in the bigger picture, one of the ways that I think we can really help ourselves and help our children and the generations behind us is starting to talk about it from a young age, which is something I do now. So a really great example that I love to use is my kiddo on the trampoline, right? So he and his 3 friends come over. We've got 4 kiddos on a trampoline bouncing around. There's body parts screaming and mostly laughter. And it's one of those environments that can be kind of difficult to interpret. Are we having fun? Is someone hurt? Yes, they're screaming, but they're fine. What is this? And so, a really easy way to introduce it is they're all jumping. I ask everyone to stop, eyes on me. And I just say, okay, everybody has a say over their body. Everybody has a say over what happens to them. And if anyone says no, ouch, stop, don't, we pause. And when do we start again? And they kind of look at me, or they look at each other. And I was like, when the person who said stop says, time in, I'm ready to go. That's when you go again, is when the other person who asked for the pause goes. And that even just setting that expectation in a low stakes environment of a trampoline tells everyone very clearly, here's my role and here's your role. And it's easy and it's flexible. So if it changes, I'm having a great time, we slammed into each other, we're all laughing, fine. Now we've done it again, and now my elbow hurts and I'm asking you to stop, we stop. And then it might happen 3 minutes later, someone else is stopping, but it's here's how we start. And so the thing about it is, it's freely given. So no one's under any expectations to jump. Anyone can get on or off the trampoline whenever they want. It's revocable. So the minute you say, yes, I want to play trampoline basketball, and yes, we can. And then there might be a moment where the ball has hit you in the head and you say, you know what? I actually don't want to play this anymore. And you get to leave or change your mind. And in a situation where we imagine those kids or ourselves dating or out in the scene, and you're starting to make out, and you all of a sudden don't want to make out, or maybe you said you were open to, your clothes coming off, you get to change your mind at any point.
Yeah. Even if you have already started having sex,
Yes.
and you say, no, stop, like, I don't want to, it hurts, whatever, because many women do have pain with sex. And that is not something we talk about very often. And also, folks, men can also have pain with sex, which is something we talk about even less.
Yes.
And so a man can say no in the middle of sex, just like a woman can say no in the middle of sex. Like any gender identification along the spectrum, it does not matter. If you are human and you say no, you stop. If you do not, legally, that is considered rape. And that is not something that a lot of people are told on either side. And so that's something that I think that we should just bring forward to, like, more so, like, I did not understand that as a young person. And that is something that I experienced rape because I told someone to stop and they didn't. And saying that aloud, like, that could be hard for some people to hear, especially like family members and whatnot. But by us sharing our story, it helps people realize where we're coming from and become more permissionaries, because there's a lot more people out there that have experienced some range of this than most of us realize. And yeah.
And normalizing, it's so important that we normalize that you can change your mind. We see a lot of media where like that ends up being the, just stories and things that put it in our mind that you can't change your mind. And that's such an important and simple concept, because for me, it was so freeing. It was a little painful to realize when you look back on your life and you think, oh my gosh, I could have changed my mind. Why didn't I? I was like, no, because I was actually taught that I wasn't allowed to, or that I was being rude. I was being pushy. I was not being patient or whatever, So just allowing that and normalizing, you get to change your mind at any point. It is revocable. And then understanding the difference that it has to be informed. Like, what am I consenting to? Yes, I am consenting to, I'm okay if you pick me up in your car. I'm okay if we go to dinner. I am okay if you drive me home. It is not okay that we go somewhere else. And so you can start to outline those things so that the person knows what I am saying I'm okay with, and they know what I'm saying I'm okay with. So just having a clear conversation about that, because we don't talk about it. We have this belief that if you can't read my mind about what pleases me or what I like, and I can't read your mind, then like we don't have the spark or we don't have chemistry. That is not sexy. No one wants to guess. I don't want to guess. Like, being able to own where I'm at, own where someone else is, and have a sensitive conversation, that's sexy. That's what I want more of that. So the information.
Absolutely. That's what I've heard from younger men, like in their 20s and whatnot, how much they appreciate older women, because mature women, they just cut through all the bullshit and they know they know their bodies, they know what they want, and they have the confidence oftentimes to just tell their partner that that's what they want. And it just takes the guesswork out of it, and it allows the other partner to relax and be less performative, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was part of my conditioning, that I wasn't really, I was not raised to make requests and demands. In fact, I was constantly given feedback about how unbecoming and unladylike it was, that I was being bossy and that I was being, too direct. So again, just realizing, oh, there is a whole different way we can do this. And so inviting that, setting that, normalizing that we're going to be very clear about what we're doing. And, and the next step is like that it has to be enthusiastic, which I think is so like this, it's like, again, do we laugh or do we cry? But the idea that it was like, oh, there are lots of times I was at a party and it was like, I guess. And like, had I known for myself that I guess, or I don't know is a no, man, I would have made so many different decisions. I just didn't know how to recognize it within myself. And I was not in a household that talked about it or said like, here, this is what your inner knowing is, or this is how you know, right? It was basically, am I going to get in trouble, right? Is this wrong? But it wasn't about like, how do you feel about it? What do you want? What is your body telling you? And so having an enthusiastic yes is one of the most empowering things, but also when you're on the other side and you can't tell where someone is, right? And so, you're with friends, like here I'm in Nevada, your recreational marijuana is around. And if you're worse, sitting at the lake and someone's like, hey, do you want a gummy? When someone's like, as soon as they go, I just move on and go, okay, let me know. And like, I don't wait. There's no pressure. You're thinking,
absolutely.
I want you to think and then come and let me know. And then we'll go over.
You're like, I'm not going to stand in front of you and be like, so what about now?
Right,
Are you
right,
ready?
right. Exactly.
It's really
Exactly. But
tasty. I think this is like the grape one. It's so good.
but it just helps you, because then you're like, I'm looking for enthusiasm. And then if you don't have it, or if you're like, you know what, I'm not feeling it. And then you get to also, you're drawing the boundary, you're helping hold the container and hold the safety for whoever's in the room. Because I will say, approaching situations in this way is different. It's like new. So it strikes other people who are experiencing it also as new. And they'd be like, wait. And you can see sort of the people pleasing tendencies, or like the I'm cool and I'm with it tendencies come out, and you have to just really support them and say, hey, I come from a place where, like, if you know, like, it has to be a fuck yes. That's what it has to be. And if it's not that, that's okay. But it means it's a no for me. If it's not a fuck yes for you, it's a no for me. And then we can come back to this, like, a totally loving and open space, because this is how we're going to keep each other safe.
Absolutely. And you don't take it personally.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Which is, that's a piece of the puzzle, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but that's really one of the magical pieces of the puzzle when it comes to talking when you're in relationship, especially a long-term relationship with someone. But yeah, taking the personal out of it and just making like, here's the framework. This is how we decide these things, and this is where we are. And then the final piece is that it's specific. So I might have said, yes, I want to have sex. I did not mean I wanted to have sex in the back of the car before we go into this party. Like that's not what I want to do. Right. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
having that level, because informed and specific are sort of parts of a similar piece, but they are different, because there are different things. Like, sure, well, we said we wanted to have sex, and how do you define sex? You might think any penetration is sex. You might not think that is sex. One of the most exciting things is that an energetic and within the erotic blueprints can have sex in a lot of different ways that some of the other blueprints can't have sex. And it definitely stretches the boundary for how the dominant culture might define sex, especially here in the Western Hemisphere. So having this, that it's freely given, revocable, informed, enthusiastic, and specific, it is deeply healing. And so once I understood it and could look through and start to understand where I was giving consent, where I had in the past and where I had not, and then it allowed me to sort of take a moment with myself to be very clear about the choices I made in the future. I felt empowered. I felt confident, because it was very clear I had made a decision in a way that came from my inner knowing, with a framework that was within my personal values, that didn't depend on anyone else and didn't infringe on anyone else. So I just found it so like healing. And I think I'm seeing it come out. I think one of the things that's very healing is someone who experienced several things as a youngster and as a did anyone go clubbing in their 20s? That was always a place you were going to get some sort of physical grab that you weren't asking for.
I was always that girl that was like saving girls from the creepy guys that were trying to get up on them at the club.
But having had this conversation with my kiddo when he and his friends, when they were 3 and 4 on the trampoline, I see them now as they're playing, and like they might be playing and they're playing with Nerf guns, and literally they're like, hey, can I shoot you? And they're like, yeah, you can. And then it's like, okay. And then they're like pummeling their legs with, or a kid might be like, yes, you can shoot me, please. Nothing from the neck up. Please don't hit my glasses. Like that's something my son says all the time. And so seeing that play out in just really boring, everyday, like no big deal situations gives me hope and faith that then in the situations where there's a little more at stake, that it's going to be just a natural part of the consideration. So my hope is that it ripples out far, far into the generations behind us, so that we just have a different experience for all of us.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing like all of that forward. And as you were talking about like the just day-to-day stuff, how important it is for us to think about consent in our conversations and our platonic engagements with people, and I think it's nice to see people these days asking, are you okay with me giving you a hug? Because I'm a very huggy person. I'm a very touchy feely person. I have been since I was a very wee lass. And it's important because some people don't want to be hugged. Some people don't want to be touched. Some people are in relationships where their partner is not comfortable with you touching them in such a way. And when I say touching them in such a way, I mean like giving them a hug, cuddling with them up on the couch because you're just a cuddle bug and there's nothing sexual that you are intending with that person.
Right.
You just like to be close and you have a level of respect there. And while they might feel okay in that situation with you and know that no boundaries are going to be crossed, their partner may not be in a space where they're like, that's, I'm not really cool with that.
Yep.
Right. Because they want to be like, that's just for us. And and it can be that it might not even be about jealousy. It can just be like, that's special for us. And I don't want to share that simple thing with another person. And that can be hard for people to understand. And it can be difficult to have conversations and like shifting things. Like when my partner and I first got together and he was like, no, I don't want you cuddling with other people on a couch. I was like, what? I don't know if I can do that. That's very hard for me because like all of my friends that I've had for decades are like, that's just that's our relationship. Right. And
Right.
breaking that habit life, right. Because I honor my partner. I love him to pieces. I would never, ever want to make him feel uncomfortable. And I feel that we have a very healthy relationship. And I do get all the nurturing that I need from him. It's not like there's a lack of nurturing, which is new for me too. But it's really important to have those conversations and think about with people, is it a good time to have a conversation with somebody, even if it's not relationship wise? Maybe you're at work and
Yes.
somebody like do they want my feedback right now? Or you're at school, or you're with friends, maybe one of your friends is struggling, but they don't actually, they need you to listen, they don't need you to give advice.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. And what I would add is that, thinking of consent, it's beyond just the physical. Sometimes it's
Yes.
emotional. Sometimes it's mental, right? Like there might be something someone shared with you and you just think it's like, oh, she told me and we're both friends, so it's fine. You might be like, do you mind if I share this, or is this? And just holding people's confidence and giving, again, that's being clear and informed and specific about how you're interacting with other people. And so for me, it's just one of those really beautiful concepts that when you think about it, you start to see all the places that it shows up and you start to understand like how important it is. And then it's a place from which like a just safe and authentic sense of agency can come forth. It's just so beautiful.
Absolutely. And the difference between whether or not like you're gossiping about somebody or you're seeking support. So say a friend comes to you and they're telling you about something that's hard. You want to help them, but you're not quite sure how to help them. Asking them consent, say, hey, I really want to help you. I feel like I
Yes.
need to talk to somebody else to get expert advice. Are you okay with me doing that without sharing your name with that person, for instance? And when you're in a small town, maybe relaying that information might give too many clues for somebody to be able to figure out who it's about, right? And then navigating that conversation with somebody, that can be kind of tender too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And how do you hold it together within yourself if somebody shares something with you and they're like, no, I really need you to that's just for you.
Mm-hmm. That's one of
And then
those
you
things.
honor bandwidth.
Yeah. And I think, for me, that's a piece of just like knowing yourself and figuring out what you need, which for me, again, started with the erotic blueprints. Like that was such an important and like deeply healing awareness when it was like, you're responsible for yourself and your own pleasure. And that means that like, if I want to be in relationship with this person and show up, like that's what they're asking me. So if I have this other need, I need to go figure it out. And it's just, there's like a piece of, I think once you know yourself and accept yourself and like let all of it. And when I say yourself, I mean all of it, like the shadows, the gremlins, the shining stars, the happy pieces, all of it. But when you know all of it and when you allow yourself to be what you are and then you come to the space of like accepting and loving yourself, then I have found, it seems that you don't need, then when someone asks something of you, like, how to take care of your needs, and it's not such a stretch to be able to honor what they're asking of you.
Yeah. Absolutely, which I think just transitions us beautifully into persona work and being able to be your full spectrum self. So I imagine that there are many people out there that are like, persona work, what on earth is that?
Yeah.
And does it make me seem like I have multiple personalities to attempt it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. And I'll say like persona work is like a more advanced technique. Like you don't just typically start with persona work, right? And especially in the world of the erotic blueprints, there's a whole lot of work and foundation building you really have to do before you can jump into it. But you don't know what you don't know. And I think if I had understood what persona work was, I beforehand, I think it would have been even like so helpful. So really, persona work is the idea, and we use it as a pathway to sort of access a part of yourself. And it's something you do to flesh out, to understand that part of yourself. And quite frankly, you don't have to build out a persona for you to put on. You can build out a persona just to understand a piece of yourself if you want. So there's so many applications. And one of the, like, to translate it into like everyday work, one of the ways persona work helped me was I showed up at the like executive level business meetings in a completely different way. And I was able to sort of access pieces of my personality and step into that persona. Not that I was disingenuous from who I am, but
Sure.
you know, some of the gremlin-y voices and some of the imposter syndrome voices and the stuff inside of me that was holding me back, because I had fleshed out this persona, it just didn't exist. And it allowed me the ability to separate from some of the things that were holding me back for an hour to show up differently.
Yeah.
So really persona work is the idea of, so in the erotic world, right? Like, let's say you are getting to know yourself. I was raised very Southern, very Christian, like in a Catholic household. So like sex was for the purpose of making babies. It was for this purpose of procreating. But I've come into my own, I'm having sex and I realize, well, I kind of think I might be a little kinky. Like, what does that mean? Right? Like, well, I don't know. And really kink is defined as anything that's taboo, right? So, for someone who has sex or believes you should only have sex in the missionary position, having sex in a different position would be kinky. That's what it would be. For someone else who has let's maybe say a deeper pool of experience and a deeper pool of what they like, it might lead into impact play or multiple partners or other things, right? But when we're not sure about a piece of ourselves, when we're not totally clear, an exercise you can do is with persona work. So you maybe pick the piece, like you describe to yourself, what is a person who is totally comfortable talking about sex? Or let's use another example. Let's say, because this is something I've never done. I have never done a striptease for any partner. It is just like not in me. I'm a dancer, I'm a former actor, performer. I'm super comfortable. But the minute it's me and one person alone in a room and you would like me to, you know, seduce you, I don't know what to do. I can't look anyone in the eye. So if I wanted to pull this part of me out where it's like, what would a person who's totally confident and like loves their body, what would they look like? What would they sound like? What would they wear? And so it's really just a journaling exercise of, let me build this person out, right? So this person would wear anything that they wanted. And this person would love all articles of clothing. And you know what? I think this person would love the color like fuchsia. This person would wear fuchsia lace underwear. That's what they would wear. And this person would just like, would love food and would just love to eat like fruit and ice cream and just would love things. And they just love life and they love touching things and they love saying things. So here I am, I'm building out this persona, right? It's like, what is this person? How does this person show up at the grocery store? How does this person drive? And so you can take it as far as you want, right? So if it's like, I think this person would dress this way and they would never say, I'm sorry. This person never says, I'm sorry. They will apologize when they've done something wrong, but they're not the person that says, oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get in your way. Like they'd never, that's not who this person is. And so when you sort of define that, and then we take it another step and we're like, let's name this person. What is this person's name? You know, okay. This person's name is Rachel. Okay, Rachel. What does Rachel wear? What does Rachel sound like? Maybe Rachel wears a different perfume. Maybe Rachel, you know, this is what she would wear. And so you just journal it out. And then we get into the like more advanced step. And there's a lot more to it. But the idea of putting Rachel on, right? So I might be able to embody this quality of just feeling a little more confident between me and my lover if I get a fuchsia pair of lace underwear and I wear some hot pink lipstick and I decide that for today, I'm not saying I'm sorry about anything. Like that's just a little way to imbue this idea of Rachel or this idea of this piece of me. And being able to name it Rachel, we're not creating a separate personality. This is not me detaching from myself or separating from myself. This is actually me creating space for a piece of myself that's never seen the light of day. And I'm just giving this piece of myself a voice and a space. And so it can literally live on paper only. It can be something you journal and it lives on paper. And it's like, who is this piece of myself? And what do they need to be seen? And maybe they don't need anything. Maybe I just needed to figure out, because I might do this whole exercise and go like, you know what? That's not me. I will not be seducing anyone. I will not be doing a striptease. It's not me. And it might also be a place where I have figured out a little bit about this personality and I tried a little bit of it on and it felt really good. And then I had a lovely, intimate experience with my partner, and maybe I'll try it on again later. And so, that's like an erotic example, but I definitely did a version of this when I realized there were certain leaders in the organization where I worked where I wasn't my most confident self. And I had the story that they believed something about me and that they didn't think I was good enough for the role and that I was still earning my spot. And so I was like, who is a person that would never, so I created Diana. Like I modeled her after Wonder Woman. It was like Diana, she always is put together and this is what she would wear and this is how she eats and this is how she talks. And so literally I had a little cuff bracelet that felt very Wonder Woman-esque. But I would, when I was starting to find it, and I just found that because I'd done the work to flesh out what a person like this would be and what parts of myself can I allow to sort of step out and shine for just a little bit, I found a way to step into that space. And so yes, you can step into an erotic persona if you're really going for something that's way outside who you normally are that you can temporarily put on. But sometimes we also find really important parts of ourselves that we've not really allowed the time and space to flourish and grow. And so there can be one of the best parts of it is that there can be a sense of integration and then just an authentic piece of yourself that comes into being because you've taken the time and given it space. So I don't know if that's if you have any questions about what persona work is, but that's like a general idea of it.
It makes sense to me. I think of how in different stages of our lives, we might have different nicknames. We might have different groups of people who we hung out with. And when we were hanging out with those people, different aspects of our personality were magnified, right? Mm-hmm. So I talk to people about that in regards to being authentic. We are complex beings. And so you can pull a sliver or a large portion of who your authentic being is and decide that you want to magnify it and go to whatever depth with whichever person and circumstance of which you find yourself within. And that way you're not being fake. You're not being disingenuous, right? Like you're just highlighting a different aspect of who you are.
Yes.
And honoring the boundaries within that space with whoever is in front of you.
Yes.
And if it's an area of yourself that you might not be engaging with that much, then it might feel more uncomfortable, right? And that's why we can do the persona work to increase that level of comfort through discovery and curiosity.
Yep. And I would also say that there is another side where sometimes it's the persona work gives us the space to free parts of ourselves that we don't want, right? And so sometimes it's being like, what is this very jealous piece of me? Like, who is this jealous person and why is she jealous? And so it can be very personal and you can do the work to be like, okay, if this piece of me were a full-fledged human, what is she? What is going on? Where is she? What's happening? And then it's not so much that you're putting it on, but you can go through the exercise of what does this piece of me need to feel maybe soothed or not threatened, or what's happening. And then you can just, again, go through the exercise of writing it out. And like I said, it's a level of integration, or just sort of you'll see it and understand it and then be able to let go of it, or at least recognize it when it's coming up. And then then you're not participating in behaviors that you don't totally understand or acting out of alignment because you've got feelings that you haven't taken the time to observe and understand. And so there is also a deep amount of healing that can happen with persona work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, because otherwise you might be blaming the people around you for the experience that you're having because you're being more reactive
Mm-hmm.
uh, than
Yep.
taking that initial action.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of healing, like inner child healing, I feel like could come forth from
Oh,
that as
yes.
we experience our thoughts and feelings without judgment. More just like, I see you, I accept you. What do you need from me? How can I create this? And when parts of us might feel like in working through a shadowed self or aspect, whatnot, what that shadowed self might say I need might not necessarily be functional for us to pull from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
like looking at that and being like, how do we navigate that? Where does it come from? Do I need support in navigating that?
Right.
Because sometimes shadow work can be a lot for a person, and you can really like go
Yes.
down the rabbit hole with and to a not good place. But really just honoring that like there's different levels of light and dark within all of us that we get to work through throughout the journey of each life. So yeah, powerful work. And it's a lighthearted thing. I remember when I used to play softball, which I loved, that access to different aspect of me. And it was always Ellie, and it was ELE, because when it was written on the back of my jersey, to me, it was always a separation between the
Yes.
two things. And I thought that was really beautiful in the mirroring aspect of it. And I'm also a Gemini. So I joke that like there's always two, you get to see two sides of every situation. And that's why we're so indecisive, because we just see so many different aspects of what's going on. And why we're like, that's over here, but no, that's over here. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's a great example of how it like naturally exists. I mean, I think I worked with a guy, he went by Andy, but he had like an alter ego that we would make fun of him when he was in a bad mood, or like, you know, he had Andrew who would come and like, oh, Andrew's here, like nobody mess around, Andrew's in the room, right? But Andy was here, like that's our lovable coworker who we love. And then when it's like, oh, Andrew's here, everybody lock it up, be on your best behavior, you know, and like we could joke about it, but there was also something very real that was happening there. So
Yeah, definitely. And as children, part of their development is actually them trying on different personalities
yep.
to discover who it is that they are. Like with my educational background, that's part of what they teach us, and how we are to help guide children as teachers to be welcoming, supportive, and talk to their parents while they're like, sometimes they think it's us as teachers that are really impacting
Mm,
their kids, but it's like, no,
sure.
this is just the developmental space that your child is in, that is 100% natural. They're picking up different traits from the kids at school. They're trying it on because their kid goes to school, the kid comes back and they're just like, what happened? It's like I'm talking to an entirely different child. And
Yes.
then we grow up and we figure out like parts of who we are and social norms, and we come to adults, and then all of a sudden doing that work of trying things on is no longer necessarily socially acceptable. And so coming
Yes.
back into a space of grace and compassion and being like, who am I? And how do I explore that in a safe way? Who are the people that I can talk to in my journey to facilitate that, right? To be supported by, so I don't have to be isolated. That's part of the reason why we have these conversations, everybody out there for the interviews, is for you to see like there are other people out there that you can reach out to as a resource, so that you can see that you're not alone in the things that you're experiencing in life. Like life is complex and hard sometimes, and also filled with so much beauty and others. The purity and just wonder that exists in this world is beyond measure. And coming together with people. And so I think that brings us to our last conversation piece, and the importance of having those conversations even when they're tender. So how do we have tender conversations with ease about sex?
Yeah. I mean, whew, we could talk for a long time about this. One of the first things that I think is so important is knowing yourself, right? So for me, consent and being able to understand things that had happened to me, and where I was in my own healing related to those things. And then really being clear with myself about and understanding my own identity. Where did I come from? Who am I? What are all my different identities? Which ones were given to me, and which ones do I choose to hold on to? And which ones can I dismiss and say, you know what, I don't need that anymore. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't have to be so easygoing. Like everybody tells me that, but you know what? I don't actually want to be. And then I'm resentful and then I'm holding on to all these feelings. And then when they finally burst forth, it doesn't ever go well. And so I'm not being seen or witnessed. I'm now acting out of alignment with myself, and no one's won. Like no one's won anything. And so for me, understanding my full self and coming to a point of accepting and loving those pieces, and that doesn't mean I'm done. Like I'm not done there. There's still plenty of things with myself that I'm like, oh, I really wish that weren't the case, but it is. But when you know yourself, when you're confronted with any energy, whether it's with your partner, in the boardroom, at the PTA, when you know yourself, when someone brings their energy to you, it's harder for them to knock you off your own game because you know yourself and you don't have as many needs from them. And that was really one of the more important pieces, was taking responsibility for myself and understanding that I needed to be clearer about what I needed. And I had to come to terms with pieces of myself that were uncomfortable with speaking up and not sure and feeling bossy or demanding. And my partner was in a space where at the time he was also taking everything personally. Anything that I said I needed was being interpreted as, you aren't doing this. Like it was a you, like he could only hear, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. And sometimes, unfortunately, that was the language I was using, which was not helpful. And other times it was me just saying, no, because I need more of this does not mean you are lacking. This is the highlight, is my need, right? So I have a pretty deep sexual appetite. I just could have sex all the time. I am in the erotic blueprints. I am a shapeshifter and a sexual. And what's interesting is when I first started this work, I was a shapeshifter and a sensual. But I know that I started as a sensual because that is what is more palatable to the culture. That is what is expected. Women are expected. So sensualness is the idea that like every sense, so appeal to my senses, have a beautiful space, have it smell nice, have it be well lit, have it be clean, so have nice soft sheets. Like anything that's appealing to my senses is how you're going to get into my arousal and into my turn on. But as I have done the work over the last 5 years and I've become much more comfortable with myself, I retook the test and I'm straight up a shapeshifter sexual. And that actually makes more sense with like, based on my understanding of the blueprints, but also because I know myself. And it was like, oh, I'm actually more comfortable to say these things out loud and to know myself. And the thing is, there's a test that you can take to find your blueprint. And the test is just the beginning. That's what your mind is telling you. And then you have to actually go through the exercise to figure out what your body is telling you, because we've been told what's okay.
Right.
What's taboo? Anything anal, right? Anal sex is often taboo. It's become more popular and more normal to reference, but I mean, when I was growing up, you didn't say that. That wasn't a word you talked about. That's something you did. And so just the ability to talk about these things and to know myself and to be comfortable with what's true for me, and then be able to be clear about, oh, what do I need? And so again, a needy woman, like that is absolutely not okay. I was like, what is the compliment that we say? Oh, she's so selfless, right? Like, that was the epitome of what it meant to be a mother in the town that I was in. Like every woman was so selfless. And I remember hearing it and thinking, that sounds like hell. Like I don't want to be that, but I know what I'm supposed to be. I know. And I think that that's how I'm going to get a partner, or that's how I'm going to maintain a partner or be a good mom. And so coming to terms with what was true and how I actually needed to show up in the world, and then finding a way to communicate about that compassionately, that is one of the most important things. Because it's not my job to tell my husband what he's not doing. It is my job to tell my husband what I need. I need more physical touch. Like I would like to have sex every day. And he has responded, that sounds nice for you. I don't think I can meet that. I'm like, okay. And that doesn't mean he's any less of like the toxic masculinity that exists. It doesn't mean he's any less of a man because he doesn't want to have sex with me every day of the week. I'm a sensual or a shapeshifter sexual. He is an energetic sensual. Like he's in a different space. So he needs different things from me to find his turn on. But what I can say is, well, what I really need is physical touch. That's what I need. And so maybe our compromise is that, here's some lotion. Could you just rub lotion on my arms and legs and my back? And so I'm getting physical touch. No, it's not necessarily sex, but it's still feeding me and feeding part of my blueprint. And so it's the idea that there is a way for us to meet each other, but I have to do my work. And quite frankly, what came out of it and what happens a lot with erotic blueprint work is that my husband needed a little more support. So we definitely needed to involve the help of a therapist just for him to figure out and have a space, because he was raised in Montana. You know what men do in Montana? They don't tell you all their feelings. That's not how he was raised. They might now, but when my husband's generation, you were not sharing all of your feelings, and you certainly weren't imposing. Like, his family would never impose on us to tell us anything they want or need. They would never, right? So we're left guessing. And where does that put us? We're not clear.
Yeah.
So this new way of relating, we needed some support. So he got a therapist. I did my work. He did his work. And lo and behold, having same language, being able to communicate clearly and understand, like, the blueprints really helped us, because I was able to understand his perspective and he could understand mine. And my need is not because he is lacking, and his lack of need, or his need being that he needs less, is not because I'm too much, because that's one of the shadows of the shapeshifters. You feel like you're too much of everything. And it's overwhelming for everyone. So having common language, coming with a sense of compassion to say, here's who I am. I love myself for who I am. I want to share something tender with you. And again, the consent, the saying, like, are you in a space that we can talk about this? And we're not talking about this in the heat of the moment. When you start making out and think you're going to go into having sex, this is not the time to talk about it. You have to talk about it in a non-arousal moment. But being clear and talking about all those pieces, and then saying, like, yes, this is what I can offer. No, this is what I can't. And just saying, we're in this together. And so that's really one of the more important shifts. Was like, at one point, it felt like our sex life was between us, and I was on one side and he was on the other. Yeah. And the beauty of the blueprints and the work that is available is that it turned into this. It was us looking at our sex life saying, what do we want from it? And how do we get there? And because I love this person, and because I care about you, I want to show up for you, and I can see you want to show up for me. And then the sheer volume of fun of what's available and what sex can be, it's a completely different world. And when we were 13 years in, after having a baby, after having terrible postpartum, I just did not think we were going to make it. And so to be where we are now, where it's not awkward, because we'd go so long without having sex, and then we'd have these moments of like, who are you? What do we do? I don't know what we do now. And then we'd sometimes get into an argument, and then nothing would happen, and we'd feel even farther away. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. And it's also because I just became comfortable with, like, oh, I'm going to ask for your consent. I'm going to tell you what I want. And this isn't me being needy. This isn't me being bossy or demanding. This is me knowing myself, and you know yourself, and we can do this. And there's so many different ways. So now it's just way more fun. I think there's this expectation that we have that when we marry someone, or we're in a long-term relationship, that automatically means we'll actually be closer, and we'll be super intimate, and you'll know everything, and everything will be easier because we're together forever. And we actually find there's data that says that that's actually the opposite. So what we actually find is that sometimes that most intimate relationship, like, because you know them, it's actually harder to get closer on the things that are your shadows, and on the things that you are having a hard time accepting for yourself. And so it takes a real sense of intention and inner knowing to be able to set that up. But for me, it's knowing yourself, knowing your needs, and then being compassionate and understanding that there is a way to reach each other. Like, there is no such thing as incompatibility. There's just rigidity or a lack of curiosity. Because as soon as you're curious about what works for you, where you're coming from, it's just a completely different conversation, and so much more fun. And then the pressure's off, because we're here having fun and experimenting, and you're just trying a thing, and you don't have to be a pro, and it's okay to have missteps and false starts, or it's gonna be awkward. You know, the first time.
You don't have to be perfect at everything.
No, you don't. And like, it's super awkward. Like, if you've never tied anyone up and you're like, hey, I'm kind of curious, will you tie me up? Like, someone like, what do I?
They're like, what, huh?
Well, and we're both actors, so it's really funny. I was like, do you want stage directions? Like, would it be helpful if it was like, move stage left, put the, like what, but seriously, but we got to turn it into a joke, but it is that awkward. Sometimes when we're moving into the space of sex and really stretching into new spaces, it is about how do we talk about this differently? And it's okay that it's going to be super awkward and you literally don't know what to do. But the beautiful part is that you're starting somewhere new and like you gave it a try and there's no expectation. And it's like, oh, I don't have to take this personally. It's not that I did this wrong and I'm embarrassed because I don't know how to tie someone up with a scarf. Like, why would you? You've never done it before. And there is a way, you know?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us today. It has been a fun conversation as promised, and deep and vulnerable, and hopefully people have learned something new and feel less alone in the things that they're going through. And if you like this, then you're going to love our group coaching call that we're going to be having live over Zoom in the Playful Pivot. And that is going to be on July 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Melissa, if they just can't wait until then and they want to talk to you, where can they find you?
you can find me. I have a website, sacredtransits.com. And in the top corner, you can start your sojourn and just click on that. And you'll be able to fill out some information about what you're curious about. And then we get to connect. You can find me on IG. I'm not really active there, but Sacred Transits on Instagram is there. You could DM me there. And I'm always happy to talk sex, death, and Reiki, my friends, sex, death, and Reiki.
It is an interesting sort of combination, but yet somehow weaves completely together.
Yeah, they really, it is. It's interesting because when you also confront death and when you think about what will allow me to let go in the end, a lot of times a regret on the deathbed is that they didn't have more sex or that they didn't have more fun, right? A lot of times the regret is I spent all my time working. It's like, well, if you're not working, what do you want to do? Like if it weren't about what everyone was expecting of you, what would you do with this time that you have? And how do you want to get there? So that's what we're doing over at Sacred Transits is we're all about the journey.
That's amazing. And speaking of the journey, who inspires you in the world today?
I have a couple and it's always changing, but right now it's Lizzo, Alok, and the younger generation. I feel like the young kids today, they are just telling us how it's going to go. They are dreaming up a new world and they are doing it with grace and with just like without the constraints of the past. And I'm so excited to see what they do. Alok is a poet and a performer and an activist for the trans community, and they are amazing. And then Lizzo is just making it a joyful world to be with your body exactly as it is. And the music and the joy and the precision and the talent just gives me life every day. And she's a Melissa. I love other Melissas. So
there you go. I would love to get to have her on the show. Maybe someday we'll be able to make that happen. And
yes.
I love Lizzo's work on all levels, both musically and inspirationally, and helping us with our body image as women in this new age.
Yep.
So Melissa, thank you so much again for being here on the show today. And for those of you who watched or watching the replay, I appreciate you. And please do stay tuned as I ramp back up with interviews. I've been gone for a while, but we're back. So thanks so much. And if you want to be on my show, feel free to DM me over Facebook or go to www.globalequineaffiliates.com. I know it's a sideways one, but we'll get there. All right, all. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.